most important part. We are recording, everybody. So your input is the single most important part of this summit. So let me just say that again. Your input is the reason that we are here today. I'm putting our agenda into the chat. And before I call up the research team to share what they have learned so far, I'd like to do a quick check-in. We haven't said much yet about the statewide energy navigator that we're all here to talk about. And so I want to ask you all, when you envision this statewide energy navigator, what's the first thing that comes to mind? So we'd like you to respond in Menti. I'm going to put that Menti link back into the chat in case you joined us a little bit late. So we'll wait just a second and we'll start sharing your responses. If you came in late and you haven't been to Menti, you can click that link, or you can go to the website that you see on the screen and enter the code. So technical things, a website related to energy efficiency, unbiased information, helping with funding. This is great. We've got about 24 responses so far, but we have nearly 180 people in the room. If you're having any trouble getting onto Menti, you're welcome to message Lima. She's got Menti support. Yep, and she's waving in her name. Okay, fantastic. We'll just take another minute or so. I just want to invite any members of the research team. Anything interesting that you're seeing? This is moving quite quickly as you all add. So it's not, you've got to be able to read things in motion. I'm seeing website as the kind of central unwavering word, but help, support, access, technical assistance.
To be revolving around the website.
It seems to be central. I also want to invite all of you. What are you seeing? You are welcome to put in the chat any reflections or things that are surprising to you, things you expected to see that you haven't seen. And we will certainly make this the final word cloud. Once it stops moving, we can make this available to everybody after the meeting. Fantastic. One thing I'm noticing is that there are a lot of words in here, and some of them are so small that even with my glasses, I can't quite read them. I don't know about you all.
Looks like resource and support along with website or some key ones.
Yeah, exactly.
The finance, equity down in there.
And I appreciate your comments in the chat about simplifying access and also recognizing that measures to homes with long paybacks may be challenging for people if they have a short tenure in their home. Yeah, and it is going to be a lot of work. Thanks, Grace. Okay, I feel like everybody is pretty successfully on Menti. This is kind of last call. If you're having any trouble, go ahead and contact Lima. Well, thank you everybody for sharing your thoughts. So I'd like to turn now to describing this foundational knowledge, the foundation for our work ahead. So I mentioned earlier that there is a wealth of knowledge in this state when it comes to increasing access and scaling up both energy efficiency and electrification. And now I'd like to call up 3 members of the CADEO Group research team to reflect back to you what you as a community already know. Our hope is that you will hear your truth here and also that you learn something new, because the research team's job over the last couple months has been to weave together insights from, I think we can safely say, well over 100 different sources in an attempt to create the fullest possible understanding of what you all know, what you know about who to prioritize, the challenges and needs, and the types of actions that can help. And what the research team is about to share with you is a summary. There are nuances and caveats galore underlying what you'll hear today. And even though we don't have time to go into a tremendous level of detail, please know that we are tracking it. So the first person you're going to hear from is Scott Reeves. Scott has a depth of experience supporting clean energy programs, and in particular, income qualified programs with his research, planning, and evaluation. Scott, give a wave. And then next you'll hear from Delane Moran. Delane has been working with energy efficiency programs for the last 20 years, helping them advance their goals of market and system transformation. And then you'll hear from Lima Hossein, who's also your Menti support today. Lima is a data analyst who focuses on equity research and strategic initiatives. Scott, I will hand the floor to you.
Great. Thanks, Marty. And yeah, thanks everyone for joining us today. And I think we're just waiting for the slide deck to get up. Okay, great. So first off, what we know from speaking with many of you, reading your reports, reviewing survey responses, there's a lot of opinions about what an energy navigator for Washington could be. So what do we mean by navigator? This was inevitably the first question that came up in many of our interviews. And so we wanted to start by laying out some key parameters that can serve as a foundation that we can work from together today and going forward. So first, this will be an entity that has statewide reach. It might not work in every place, but there's no place that's outside of its purview. Next, with regard to its purpose, its reason for being, it's really to bring energy efficiency and other clean energy services to more people. So increase reach and scale of existing and future program offerings, really agnostic to funding. Next, work of this navigator is guided by a core value of prioritizing populations with the greatest need for these services. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. And finally, the navigator does not act alone. It will coordinate with programs, organizations, other entities doing similar work. And the navigator will need to really effectively leverage existing systems, firsthand knowledge of local communities, trust relationships to meet these overarching objectives. So next, over the last 2 months, we've conducted a set of research activities. And one of the key findings really is that you have an incredible depth of knowledge and experience about who you want to prioritize, what the challenges are, and what to do to expand access. So first, we talked to a number of Washington stakeholders, including leaders of community organizations, utilities, state agencies, elected officials. We also interviewed experts in other states leading energy programs with elements similar to those envisioned for the navigator, such as Michigan Saves and Oregon Department of Energy, really to learn what's working for them and bring the best ideas from these other places back to Washington. Next, we also launched a short survey to cast a wider net and assess a set of similar topics around, current challenges and what a navigator could solve for. And then finally, we reviewed regional and national reports that provided insights into elements of navigator services and purpose. These documents represented hundreds of conversations with Washington residents and community organizations, such as some of the community engagement work conducted through the clean energy implementation plans. So I'm now going to pass it to my colleague, Delane, to step through this next section.
Thanks, Scott. So our findings from these efforts revealed a general consensus that the populations listed here are the priority populations. Please note that this isn't a complete list, and I did see some comments in the chat about what, listing different additional communities. So this isn't intended to be exhaustive. These are the most common categories that emerged in the existing reports and in conversations with Washington stakeholders. There are many ways to characterize these prioritized populations. For example, we could include race or ethnicity or geography, but most commonly, you all use income, housing status, or building type to describe them. So the work that you all have done builds a detailed picture of what these groups need to increase the likelihood of adopting energy efficiency and electrification. There's substantial agreement among local and national experts, and this is supported by survey responses we received in advance of this summit, and a review of primary data reported in existing literature through CEIPs and low-income needs assessment documentation. A couple of things to keep in mind as we start, I'll build this up a little bit. First, what we're focused on here today are the needs of residential customers. Many of these features will also be applicable to owners of multifamily buildings and small commercial buildings, but for our purposes today, we've sort of isolated residential customers. And again, not an exhaustive list. We've pulled out key themes that occurred most frequently that seemed most critical to our goal of increasing access to energy services. Okay, so first, the data indicate a need for trusted messengers. These populations, those priority populations we listed, really need to receive information from someone they trust. That may not be the government. Trust can be local, it can be linguistic, it can be created through ethnic identity or reflect the values of specific communities. Second, we need to ensure that people are aware of what's available to them and that there are options to access the resources, the services, and the information about what to do. Then households need to engage with programs with unbiased information about what to do first, second, and third. We also heard repeatedly that there is not enough funding to reach all qualified households with services on the scale and the timeline that Washington needs to meet its climate goals. Identifying, qualifying, and enrolling more households won't help if they're all added to waiting lists that are constrained by funding. We need to acknowledge that program funding is limited, so it will be unlikely to cover all costs for all households. This is where the opportunity to braid funds from grants, from state and local subsidies, maybe financing, or other innovative solutions will be important to identify and reduce upfront and total project costs. The next two items have to do with reducing friction and streamlining the experience for participants, making it easier to be referred directly without additional paperwork or other administrative hassles, and receiving support that reduces the time and complexity required to complete projects. And then finally, everyone needs access to high quality service providers and contractors so the work is done well and the equipment performs as expected. So in terms of what could be done statewide to meet those needs, you all have a lot of ideas, and we probably more than we have time to talk about today. So again, we are kind of pinning these into the core actions. The first is providing information. Households need to have information about what resources are available. This can be complicated depending on your location, your utility, your income, family size, housing status. So the information has to be unbiased. It has to be perceived to be unbiased, and it has to help people understand where to focus limited time and resources. It's also important that this information comes from that trusted source and be culturally relevant. It needs to be in the right language. It needs to be understandable. It needs to be relatable. A second important area of work is all about the money. In this domain, people want to see a navigator enable additional resources. This could reflect increased funding, but it could also indicate better strategies for braiding together multiple funding sources, including grants or things that we haven't identified even yet, or even the provision of low-cost financing solutions to support households that still have a cost share. These financial tools help people access all of the possible resources that are out there for them and ensure those resources work together. They aren't in conflict, so that the amount of money a household needs to spend out of pocket is as small as possible. Another maybe major area for the Navigator is project support. This goes beyond just information and the financial resources to include other things that help people understand what they need to do to take action. We've heard you talk about the importance of case management or providing help at every step along the way, about understanding and prioritizing the unique needs of their home, helping to find qualified contractors and assistance navigating the complex web of resources. Activities in this vein could include case management, could include direct connection to contractors and service providers, or technical and application assistance. Okay, another one is another potential role for the Navigator is to focus on the people who are doing the work, the contractors, the electricians, the HVAC installers, the workforce. Access to high quality contractors and other service providers is uneven. While weatherization and the trades workforce is tight everywhere right now, the issue is acute in rural areas where a smaller contractor pool creates special challenges. Washington does have a weatherization workforce roadmap that includes a range of potential strategies for growing that workforce broadly and increasing the skill level of those involved. In our work so far, it hasn't been clear exactly how the Navigator might best support those efforts, but the existing literature and the input we've received so far indicates the Navigator could help connect customers with the existing workforce, support efforts to build that and train that workforce, and generally ensure projects are completed with high quality. Finally, all of these activities could benefit from an investment in infrastructure. The existing infrastructure that's currently supporting these programs is likely insufficient to enable all of this work. So the requirements of infrastructure and the corresponding investment should ultimately reflect the highest priority activities. Infrastructure could include websites, streamlined interfaces, databases, other behind-the-scenes functions that reduce friction and keep things running smoothly. Ideas along this vein that emerged included items like convening and coordinating efforts that enable us to see gaps, share learning, and surface great ideas. Other ideas that emerged included aligning technical requirements to flag equipment that might qualify for multiple rebates, or creating a pathway to more easily stack funding sources. And then there's this grab bag of data management. Data management infrastructure emerged in multiple conversations, and this should also reflect what types of things that would be helpful to track statewide, maybe certainly resources that are available and to whom, perhaps a record of qualified tradespeople, maybe the results of home energy audits. Data management includes tracking, opportunity analysis, software, tools, and it really needs to support policymakers and program implementers, the people who are out doing this work right now. Okay, with that, I'm going to hand off to my colleague Lima to talk through a few more items.
Thanks, Delane. So there's definitely a lot to think about here. And before we start our discussion, I'll just do a quick recap. First, we talked about information as one aspect or action that can be a part of the Navigator. We talked about providing information specifically about the availability of resources and unbiased technical information. This is especially important when this information is provided in a culturally specific way and it's coming from a trusted source. Then we also talked about financial aspects. We talked about money, additional financial resources like rebates, tax credits, grants, and financing. And this is also, there's a need for an ease of stacking and rating funding sources here. Then we also talked about workforce, the people, supporting the people that will be doing the work in our buildings. This includes training them, bringing new people into the jobs, connecting them to customers. We talked about project support as well, and supporting people with all of the other things that really make electrification and efficiency hard. Getting people motivated to do something, deciding on what to do, helping them with that, helping them find contractors, understanding the economics and the technical aspects of the work, and managing the work itself. Lastly, we talked about infrastructure. So all these things that are nearly invisible to building owners, but that just might be the key for bringing this type of work to scale. This includes the behind-the-scene functions, like supporting coordination and learning, aligning requirements for technical equipment, creating some ease of rating and stacking funds, or even centralizing data management. And no doubt, there's definitely more important things that we haven't included. And maybe it's something that you've said, or something that you've written that we've overlooked, or maybe there's something that you all know that hasn't made it into our bank of knowledge that our research team has drawn upon. So we want to ask you, what's missing?
Thanks, Lima and Delane and Scott. So let's just pause for a minute. We have just gone through a lot of information, a synthesis, as we mentioned, from well over 100 sources. And so I want to invite you to use the chat at this point. Is there something really important that we didn't say? Maybe there's a specific community. I saw someone earlier in the chat mention mobile and manufactured homes. Is there a particular need or challenge in our communities in Washington State that you want to call attention to? Is there an activity that you think it is absolutely critical that the Navigator take on that just maybe we didn't mention it? We didn't mention a lot of things, but maybe it doesn't fit into any of these buckets that we've created. Or maybe you want to share a finer point, a caveat, a nuance on any of the items that the research team just mentioned. So let's just take a minute, and I want to invite everybody to both enter your thoughts in the chat and also to browse the chat and see what your fellow attendees today are saying. And I love to see people using the reaction. So if you see something that you're really excited about, you can give it a heart, you can give it a thumbs up. And so you all know the chat today will be saved in it. Your chat and the comments you put in it are going to be a really important inclusion in this work as we move forward. And anybody on the research team, if you want to comment, if you're seeing anything in the chat that you want to call attention to. I saw an income verification tool that did come up as well quite a bit during the research. So thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, there was an earlier comment about IRA funding, and yeah, I think that would definitely be something that this, really state, local, everything would feed into it.
I see a lot of notes on contractor support networks, collaboration with other entities, including educational entities. That's a great comment as well.
Yeah,
okay,
and
go ahead.
we did do some interviews as part of this and looking for organizations that have elements of a navigator. There's nothing that's exactly like what Washington is envisioning right now. So if you have other suggestions for those, go ahead and throw them in there, because we are not done. We have more interviews to complete. We'll continue this work, and so we're open to ideas, and we'll make sure we've got them on our list already. So.
Yeah, I saw Mass Save and Energy Trust of Oregon. Those were some of the example programs we looked at. But there was about 20 or so that we spoke with.
So I want to invite you all to continue putting things into the chat. I'm personally really excited to take some time after the meeting today and read what you all put in. These are absolutely critical insights. And as I mentioned, they are going to be incorporated into this work moving forward. But now we've all talked enough, and we want to turn the floor over to you. So if we were all together, say in a conference room or an auditorium, right now we'd be asking you to turn to the people on either side of you and have a short conversation. But since we're here in Zoom, we're going to be using breakout groups. So here is what is going to happen. You're going to have about 10 minutes, a little bit more than that, in a group of 3 to 4 people. If you are able to, please turn on your camera when you get into the small groups. It really helps us have a more real conversation with each other. In your small groups, there are 3 things that we'd like you to do. And I am about to put them into the chat, along with a summary of the possible Navigator activities that my colleagues mentioned. Okay. So here are your directions. First, we'd like you to introduce your perspective. Who are you speaking as? Are you speaking as a homeowner, or as a utility program manager, or an HVAC contractor? And then we'd like you to take turns answering this discussion question. It's 3 years from now. Washington has a statewide entity that is enormously successful in advancing energy efficiency, electrification, renewable energy. How has this statewide entity helped you? What we are looking for here is your personal vision. 3 years from now, what does it look like? What does it feel like when we've stepped up and met this climate challenge head on? What is different for you? We also want you to share your vision in Menti. So you can do this during the small group discussion by going to the same link that we've been using before. But there will also be time for you to share it in Menti when we come back together into our big group. And when we come back together after the small groups, we are also going to get the chance to see what all the other groups have been talking about. And I can tell you right now, there's somewhere around 42 small groups that are going to be meeting right now. So before we send you off to what most people will say is their favorite part of any meeting, 2 logistical notes. First of all, you can message me, Marty, at any time if you need technical assistance or if you need support with the discussion, and one of us will drop into your room. And you are also going to see a countdown timer in the upper right side of your screen. So please make sure that everybody in your group gets 2 or 3 minutes to share. Okay, I'm about to send you off. When you get to your rooms, just a reminder, start with introductions and then take turns sharing your vision of what success looks like 3 years from now. Okay, we'll see you back here shortly. If you're still here in the room with us, it's because you joined late and I'm assigning you to a room right now. Rima, do you want to stop sharing? That way it's easier to see who all, if there's anybody else left here. I see a couple of you. Let me find you and send you to a room. Sorry, John. I'm sending you off now. So I'm seeing a few people, you all, Larry, James, and Bob, who look to me to be in rooms, but yet are still showing up here. Let's see. Okay. Some people just keep bouncing out. I don't know why. Uh, There we go. And Larry, you're the last person left here. Okay. All
Nice
right.
job, Marty.
Do you want to stop? Let's stop the recording. Nobody needs to see the chit chat.